So when you start a new job at a new company, one of the first things that you usually think of is, how am I going to use this job to advance my career, right? One of the things that should be in the back of your head at all times is, a long-term vision for your career's trajectory, right? You got to think about, what do you want to do in a couple of years? If you want to manage, if you want to just become a senior developer, there's a lot of different ways to take your career. What I want to talk about today is a couple of different ways that you can advance your career, a couple of different things that you can do that I've learned throughout my career that you might not always think of, but they have a huge impact on your career and the trajectory that it'll take. So the first thing and the most important thing that I want to talk about is being able to communicate effectively with your team. What you want to do is be able to communicate to your team at all times what you're doing, what you're blocked with, and what you're doing to kind of mitigate the issue. You always want to communicate to your team what you're working on, because if anything should happen, if you have to switch priorities, if you get sick, if you're going on vacation, another team member is going to be taking that responsibility onto themselves. If you're not communicating properly what you're working on and, the struggles, the things that you're running into, then, when they take over the project, it'll basically be them starting from scratch. And that is not what you want to happen. You want them to be able to pick up from where you left off using the knowledge that you shared with them and that you've been sharing, so they can quickly, not have to start from zero and, look for the root cause, look for a bug, all that stuff. They can just pick up where you left off and finish the project in a quicker way than they would have otherwise. You really want to be able to express all your thoughts and all of your ideas, because this is honestly the key for working for a dev team. Whatever you're working on is going to affect the rest of your team, and vice versa, what they're working on is going to affect you as well. So it's really important that everyone knows what everyone else is working on. You can be working on a small team, you can be working on a bigger team, on a team like in person or remotely, but every single time the difference between success and failure is how well the team is able to communicate with each other. It could be very frustrating if you're a good employee, but you don't really communicate your issues well, because even though you get all the work completed, even though everything's got done on time and it's done well, if you're not keeping the rest of your team in context, that'll waste their time in the future, because they'll have to look into things. They'll have to, if they're struggling with some sort of issue, they'll spend a couple of hours diving into it. And then, if they reach out to you and you say, oh yeah, okay, my bad, this is something I was going to get to. Had they known what you were doing in the first place, they wouldn't have spent that time, and, they would have been more efficient. I know that this can be difficult when you're a new member of a team or you're a new grad and it's your first full-time job, but, the best thing you can do is not to be nervous and to talk as much as you can. It's better to talk more than to not talk enough. If you don't know something, then say it. If you have a question, then ask it. Everyone says there's no such thing as stupid questions, and that's definitely true. And, this also extends to any deliverables that you have, any projects that you're working on. If you think that you won't be able to finish a project on time, let your manager know, let your team know. The sooner the better. The clearer the communication is between you and your team, then the more efficient everyone can be. No one's going to get upset at you if, a couple of weeks before the deliverable date, you notice that there's some sort of issue, and then you communicate with all the, stakeholders that, okay, I've run into this could be a problem. We might not be able to make the date. But if you wait until the last couple of days beforehand and then you bring that up, then, that's when issues can arise, because no one was informed. There's usually teams working, in parallel on a certain thing that all have the same goal of a certain date. So one team not making a deliverable in time could impact the rest of the team. And that's why it's really important, and arguably the most important part of your job when you're a software developer, is the communication with your team. The second thing I want to talk about is that you can always be yourself. You can be a normal person when you're working. I've worked at some companies where people were only focused on the technical side of things, where they're only focused on the job. Every single time you talk in a Zoom meeting, and it's even harder, over Zoom, where you can't be talking in person, but I've seen it so many times where there's basically no rapport between a team. I've worked at some places where literally people would just not talk all day, even before COVID, and it really just isn't a good workplace to be in. What you want is to be yourself. What you want is to develop a rapport with your teammates, to be able to tell some jokes, to laugh together, and in my opinion, that's what makes a workplace good to work at. When you ask someone, right, like, do you like working at your job? You know, obviously the actual job itself is important and the work that you're doing is important, but most of the time if people are like, oh my god, I love my job, one of the first things they mention is, oh, my team is awesome, there's a lot of really nice people, really funny people that you know you can go out with, and not just talk about work. To myself personally, this is really important whenever I work somewhere, and I'm lucky enough to have a team where everyone is really nice and there's great communication, there's great rapport. But I also have been on the other side where, you know, it's super boring. No one talks to each other, no one cracks jokes, you don't even know what anyone likes. The reality is you probably have so much more in common with your teammates than you think, but you just never know because no one ever communicates, no one ever talks other than, you know, what they're working on in the tasks that they have. You know, if you communicate with your team, if you guys become friendly, this not only helps you gain a friend, but it also helps you gain a contact for the future. If a couple years down the line you are no longer working with someone that you were pretty close with on your team, and you lose your job, for example, you can always reach out to them, see if they have any openings, and then, you know, that's when this relationship becomes even more beneficial. I'm not saying just use people for contacts, but honestly, it may not be the worst thing ever. It's just another positive to developing a friendly relationship with your teammates. And just like, you know, nobody wants to be around someone boring. Nobody wants to have like the most boring team on the planet. Everyone has their interests, everyone likes to have fun, everyone likes to joke around. So, you know, what I would do is don't be too afraid to be yourself. I know maybe it might take some time at the beginning, but I really think that if you're on a team that is very quiet, if you start coming more out of your shell, the rest will as well, because they're just humans, right? And the third thing I want to talk about is initiative. Now, in software development, what this could mean is that if you see a potential issue that hasn't been brought up yet, you can fix it, right? This can also mean if there's a recurring bug that the team is running into that isn't really a blocker, it's something small, but you always see it, you know, fix that little bug. It's doing the things that not everyone wants to do, right? This can also be, you know, if the same question is being asked multiple times, or if, you know, several members of your team are constantly performing the same action, maybe documenting it or automating it could be the solution. But what you want to do is take initiative to perform some sort of action, because what this does is it helps your entire team. This can be even, you know, operational things or design documents or to-dos that are left over, anything that kind of no one wants to do and you pick that up and get it done. This can really be beneficial to advancing your career. Now, I've spoken of initiative as a mostly external thing so far, but, you know, initiative can be very internal as well. If you can really reflect on yourself and identify your weaknesses and work on them to improve them in the future, this is also taking initiative. If you know that you have a bad habit or something that you can improve on in your day-to-day life at work, and you identify it early without having been told, and then you fix it, that is way better than having someone tell you what you're doing wrong and then you fixing it yourself. Although both ways are like acceptable, if you can take initiative, fix that within yourself, and then, you know, improve and iterate, you know, keep reflecting and keep improving, that will be so beneficial to advancing your career, because you'll constantly be improving, you'll constantly be getting better, be getting confidence, and the snowball is just going to pile up, you know. So guys, the three things I talked about today, you know, communicating with your team, being a normal person, being yourself, and taking initiative, these are some things that may seem trivial, but, you know, after a couple of years working as a software developer, these are really the pillars of, I think, of, you know, advancing your career and being successful. Obviously, there's a lot of technical stuff that comes with being a software developer, but the soft skills are so important to thriving at work, to advancing your career, and enjoying yourself. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. As always, leave a like down below, comment if you have anything to add. And as you know, I would love a subscription to the channel. It always makes my day. As always, guys, have a good day and enjoy your coding.